So today is all about mastering. We've got a mastering engineer to come and visit us today to give us advice on our mixers, but more importantly to guide us through the steps required for us to prepare our tracks to be sent then to a professional mastering engineer. Okay, so welcome to our studio, Sam. Just want to confirm, we've not met before today, have we?
This just about 3 minutes ago.
About 3 minutes, time to make a coffee. As those who have followed the channel will know, we're just three old farts on a journey of trying to make some music. And we realise that you get to a certain point in time where you have to call the professionals in. And throughout the series, I've often said I'm not a teacher. In fact, Sam, you were telling me that you do a bit of...
I do, yeah. I do a bit of university lecturing where I've done a lot of it over the years in recording and recording, mixing various things around.
Well, Sam is a professional master engineer, and we are going to give him our files once we've decided whether it's going to be stems or the 2-bus, which we'll talk about in a bit. He's not listened to the music. He doesn't know what he's going to be subjected to. I'm really nervous because this will be the first time I've played my mixers to a professional, so I'm hoping that they sound all right. But then we're going to start to talk about how to prepare these sessions for mastering, because I think we've both, as we discussed on the phone, there is a lot of false information, certainly on YouTube. And we thought the best way of trying to advise you how to prepare a track for mastering is to bring in a professional master engineer. So without further ado, I'm going to play the first track.
Great.
I'll let you sit in the middle so you get the best hearing point.
What are we listening on, just so I know?
You're listening on the Adams A77.
Cool, yeah. I'll sit back a little.
Now, for those that you don't know, you're able to watch me mix this track from start to finish, and I'll leave a link in the description below to the playlist for this song.
Hard times is getting older when you still feel like a child. She feels the world is getting smaller day by day, so she confines his mind to speed, to plug in time of need. We feel the need is all embracing. Under the glare of all these lights, under the glare of all these lights.
Great. Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my first impression, it sounds good. The balance is really nice.
Good.
And the arrangement style, I like the way the arrangement breathes as well. It leaves some space for it to grow and some space for it to, to sit back, which is really important, I think. So you hear too many mixes that are just on and then off all the way through. I hear a few little things in the frequency, no more than I expect. Again, it's really hard to make a judgment here because I don't know the room, and maybe we could have just a little shoot around the other monitors. As one thought, I had the overall, it's quite compressed, the overall thing. It'd be interesting to hear it breathe in a little bit more in terms of compression.
Well, one of the things that we do need to talk about is what processing you keep on the mix bus, because I have got it going through a limiter.
Yes.
Now, I realise that when I prepare these to send to you, that's the last thing you want is the song to be pre-limited.
Yeah. Yeah, so normally the normal process the mixers I work with go by is they'll do a limited version, sometimes call it a CD ref or a hot version or whatever, which that'll be the version that everyone's listened to normally. So that'll be the version that goes to the band. If there's a label involved, that's the version that everyone's heard.
Right.
And then when they send it to me, they'll take the limiter off.
Right.
And they'll give me a version with a little bit of headroom, but they generally also send me the limited version. So on your mix bus, you've got the limiter, and then you've got a compressor before the SSL. Yeah.
I have a mix bus compressor.
Yep.
This is something I probably want to keep on
Yeah.
because this glues it together.
I'd say on that one, I'd say definitely keep your mix bus compression on. What I always say to mixers when I'm talking about mixing as well is, ideally start your mix with your mix bus compression on.
Yes.
Mix with it on there all the time.
I do. Yeah.
Which is the best way, definitely. And then that's part of the mix. Actually, if you take that off, then your mix will probably fall apart quite a lot.
Yeah.
So that wants to be on. What I would say is, if people are going through this process, if they're doing a mix without the mix bus compression on, don't then stick a mix bus compressor on at the end. I can do that. And you know, it makes more sense for me to do that at that point.
What I can do is, if I play you that again now through the same speakers, but I'll take off, because this had a bit of saturation on as well, so I'll take that off altogether. I'll leave the mix bus compressor on screen.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what that's doing.
But the volume will be substantially less.
Yeah.
So we'll just compensate for that.
I think in terms of the frequency range of the mix, the bass, there's quite a lot of sub in the bass and low end. There's a little hole in the mix, in this room anyway. Yeah. There's a little hole above the bass, and then there's like quite a lot in the high mix. I think it's maybe like in the master I'd be looking to like fill that hole a little bit, or it might be something you can think about in the mix. You know, just like to really connect that bass back into the rest of the mix. It might be that the bass is kind of masking a few bits a little bit as well.
36. I'll just pause it there.
Yeah.
I think the bottom end is always, for me, is the biggest challenge, because
Always is.
I don't have a sub in here, so I don't know how much below these speakers. I think they go down to about 38.
Yeah.
What I can do is we'll flip to the smaller Adams, but then you lose all the bottom end, so then the top end of the kick sounds as if it's too loud.
Yeah.
And when I've mixed on the Adams and then on the P7s and then flipped back to the A77s, the bottom end's just, all over the place.
Yeah.
So again, I think this is another reason why it's vital that you take your material to a mastering engineer, because you will understand your speakers and your room intimately.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to adjust. And this comes back to this question about whether we are better sending you the stems. So if you look on the screen, I send all my instrumentation to a range of stems. So we've got the strings are sax, piano, guitars, bass, and they all go into the music bus.
Yeah.
Then I've got drums, vocals and effects. Well, the effects go into the music bus as well. But then they are routed to the mix bus, the master bus. Now, from a mastering point of view, you could possibly work easier by using the stems, because if you find that there is a difference between the bottom end of the kick drum and the bass, you can make those amendments on the stems before it gets into the mix bus.
Yeah.
But then you're taking over a certain amount of control of the mix as opposed to doing the mastering. So can you kind of explain what the pros and cons of that are?
Yeah, I think if it's kind of monitoring issues, that the things that are happening in your monitoring that lead you a certain way, then that normally should be the same. If you're consistent across all the different mixes or different sections of a mix, then normally that's stuff that can be put right in mastering. They can be changed in mastering mainly without going to the stems.
Right.
I generally prefer not to work with stems.
Right.
Because what I want to have is I want to have a mix that the person's really happy with.
Yeah.
And that means that I can give back a master that they're hopefully even more happy with.
Yeah.
So when people sort of call me up and say, "Oh, I'm going to send you stems," my first question tends to be why.
Right.
And if the answer is because I'm not happy with my mix, then I'd say, well, let's look at the mix.
Right.
Let's send me over the mix. Let's look at it and do some tweaks. But if I do receive stems, I'll sum the stems and I'll start mastering as if I had a stereo track.
Right. Okay.
And then, like you're saying, if I then needed to, if there was something really critical that I needed to change, I might go to a stem.
Right.
And tweak something around. So I'm not against receiving stems, as long as it's not for the reason that the person who's sending them is not happy with the mix. Or, obviously people sometimes send the mix and say, "Oh, I'm a bit worried about the bottom end or the top end, or can you try and pick out some that, that's kind of fine." But if it's like a big structural problem that they're worried about, then it's best to go back to the mix and get it right, I think. I would be interested to still hear a version with the compression just backed off a slight little bit. The other thing that I hear is they've probably got quite heavy de-essing on the vocal, I think, which to me sounds a little bit too, and that's the sort of thing that is really difficult to like backing off de-essing is impossible in mastering. Putting a bit more on is very possible.
Well, we can have a look. We've got the de-esser there.
The de-ess is one of those things that's quite personal as well, and also it's one of those things that once you start homing in on the S's, I do it with mastering. Once you start homing in on the S's, everything else disappears, and all you can hear is the S's, and it's very easy to overdo them.
Mumbling something about privacy under the glare of.
So on the de-essing, do you think we're at the wrong frequency, or are we just?
I think it's probably just doing too much
on the threshold.
I think so. Can I just hear it with it out? Just so that it's got some frequency, so it keeps some options there.
New ideas won't bring fresh air. Fixed ideas won't bring those changes.
Just with that little bit less compression, those toms really come out now. It's a lot nicer.
I take such careful steps ahead of me.
So we're aiming for about no more than -6.
Yeah, I'd be doing a lot less than that. I think, to me, what I'm hearing, you hardly need any of that.
Where it is, I should pause and get off.
Yeah, I think you don't need that much of the de-esser at all. To me, I think things with the de-essers, it pushes the vocal back as well. Like, the presence is what makes it feel more intimate and closer.
And let's just then have a quick look on the bass. So this is carving. I have a similar one on the kick drum, but reverse. So I'm creating a bit of space on that. I'm boosting quite a bit at 800 here, so I could maybe cut that back a bit.
Yeah, it might be around there. It might be a bit lower than that. What I was hearing, but possibly it might be. That's quite wide. Oh no, it's quite narrow.
Yeah, it's quite narrow.
So that might be it.
And then, I've just got a lot of buzz and fret noise, so I'll try to cut that out of it. And then I've got a parallel bass, a little boost at about 250.
Yeah, just a little bit level back in there, and
so we cover up our life.
That's all sitting now. It's this whole mix on.
Can you give me a sense? One of the difficult parts to an amateur like me is that separation between the bass guitar and the kick drum, and how have we done on that?
The tactic of doing the reverse EQ as a starting point is quite a good starting point. Obviously, again, it starts at the recording stage really, and getting the sounds to work. But I think it's sitting pretty well. I think the bass was, like I said, it was quite strident. It was masking quite bits of the mix higher, I think, previously. Yeah, I think what I tend to do with that is I listened. I had the mix running, and I was muting the bass, but trying to not listen to the bass.
Right. Yeah.
And then so just trying to focus on the kick drum, put the bass in and out, and listen. Is the kick drum changing?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you get a tonal change in the kick drum, that means there's something going on.
Right.
In terms of masking and getting them to sit together.
Right.
And it's pretty solid. I would say that I think this boost at 200 on the kick, or is also kind of muddying the water a little bit.
Right.
I think by taking a little bit of that out.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just that, everything in the mix, you've like got the kick and the bass at the bottom, you've got hi-hats and reverb and acoustic guitar at the top. Everything else is fighting for that bit in the middle.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to try and ease some parts into the low and highs away from the middle will just leave a lot more space for the. Obviously the middle is where the power and the body of the mix is, but we'll just leave that little bit of extra space.
Yeah.
It's a nice sort of subby thing in that kick drum, isn't there? Is that real?
Yeah.
Just the sound of the drum, yeah. There's a really nice. Oh, it's the faders moving that little noise. I wonder what it was. There's a nice a book I was reading, Mixing with Your Mind, I think it is, where he talks about with a mix, what you're trying to do is get the maximum effect or the maximum impact from a sound with the minimum movement of the meters.
Yes.
And I think with kick drums, having a bit more slap, a bit more high mid, can push it through the mix and allow you to turn it down.
Right.
And then which gives you that thing of giving you more headroom for everything else and leaving more space for your bass and all that kind of thing. Also, in your mix, the voicing of your snare is really snappy.
Yeah.
Really got a lot of snap, a lot of high mid on it. It's nice to get a little bit of a similar voicing on the kick drum.
Right.
Just so they sit together, feel like the same thing.
Yeah.
So obviously that sounds a bit more slappy now, but I think in the mix.
No, I still know where
There's the warmth is nice in that 200 actually. I think we should leave some of that in. I think just a little bit more cut, and then just put the bass in there as well. I'm just intrigued by this EQ. Can I just open it?
Yeah. On the Snare, it'll be a combination of the EQ. Oh right, it's this one. Yeah.
So that's taking out
a lot of notches,
taking out some ringiness.
Yeah, there's all sorts of noise going on.
Yeah. And again, small changes, a couple of dB, and that's with the mastering. Like a lot of the changes are pretty small, like half a dB. Like it can be. Sometimes you have to do big changes, but more often than not, a few small changes can make quite a big difference.
Well, this is why I think this type of exercise is worthwhile, because if I'd have sent you what you listened to start with without just making those slight changes, it would have made your job a little bit harder in the mastering process.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of time spent beforehand.
Yeah,
doing a few tweaks can make a really big difference to the overall.
And it's not as if you've messed with the overall sort of direction of the mix. Your professional ear has just heard those areas that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much with mastering. I'm very much of the opinion that I'm not trying to imprint my sound onto it. No. Obviously, like things I master probably have a bit of a sound because it's got go through the same gear and all that. But I never try and imprint my sound on it. What I'm trying to do is like I'm trying to light the painting in the best possible way. Bring out the great things in your mix that are there. Bring them out and make them as apparent as possible. Rather than trying to kind of, say like, I don't like it, I'm going to try and change it.
Yeah.
Because also I like to think that most people, by the time they send me something to master, they're pretty happy with it. If they wanted to make big changes to saturation and harmonic stuff, they would make them.
Yes, yeah.
And sometimes I will add a little bit of saturation, a little bit of harmonic stuff, or just my equipment will have its own harmonic profile. But I'm not often trying to make really big changes in those ways.
Okay, so the next step, if we were happy with that mix now, and I certainly think it's sounding a lot better than what it was, and we've already had the discussion that you would prefer to work off a stereo track, we're now in the realms of, do we print the track or do we bounce the track? And if we do decide to bounce it or even print it, what levels are you looking for from the WAV file? So if we played this bit here over, I've been aiming for about -14 LUFS.
Okay. I take such careful steps ahead of me. Every step designed to make a move.
It's actually a bit less now with the changes that you've made.
It's kind of a quieter section as well, and you might want to rebalance a bit with that new EQ. So I'm not too worried about the volume, about the LUFS and the RMS levels so much. I want a little bit of space at the top of the peak levels. So if you can have it peaking, I say ideal world scenario, it's -6.
Right.
But if it's -3, fine. -2. What I don't want is it peaking or any chance that there's things between, like intersample peaks going over in between. But the thing is, the resolution's so high now. If you're going to bounce these out 32-bit, or we'll talk about that in a minute, but even at 24-bit, the dynamic range is so huge that if I have to turn it down by 3 or 4 dB to start my work, and I'll do that at 64-bit, it's negligible. There's going to be no loss of.
Okay.
So I wouldn't, as long as it's not right up around 0.
Right.
Fine. In terms of the LUFS and the loudness level, I don't know how other people feel about this. I said, don't worry about that too much. Let me worry about that. Again, I don't, even with my masters, I don't aim for a certain number of LUFS.
Right.
I let it go to where it needs to go. I like calibrated volume in my studio, so I know how loud my studio is, and I push things to where I feel they need to be.
Right.
And then I tend to use the meters to confirm that
I'm
in the right place.
Yeah. How does that sit with, because the sort of information you get about the streaming is that the likes of YouTube and Spotify, they aim for, is it -8 or -4?
Well, -14. Their loudness normalised to -14.
But don't they change it anyway? So if you sent something in that was above -14,
they'll bring it down to -14.
Right.
Yeah. But I also wouldn't aim for -14. This is a conversation I have quite a lot. I think the thing to say is, at the moment, Spotify and YouTube normalise to -14. That might change in the future.
Right.
Apple Music's already changed how they do it recently. Spotify's changed. They've all changed quite over the last, say, 5 or 6 years. They've all changed their loudness normalisation.
Right.
Some of the systems loudness normalised by track. Some of the systems loudness normalised by album. Some of the systems, when you put a playlist together, they'll do each track separately. Some will do the whole playlist together.
Right.
There's a lot of different permutations of how that loudness normalization is going to work.
Right.
And with that, this sounds, the best way is to get the best sounding masters you can.
Yes.
Hand them over and let them do what they're going to do with them.
Yeah. And
So-
from a mastering engineer's point of view, if you sent something in and they do that adjustment, do you think it affects the overall quality of the music, or is it just a volume change thing?
It won't. It shouldn't affect the overall quality.
Doesn't affect
there's
the
no more
balance
limiting
or-
in there. It's literally just turning the fader.
Right.
And actually, with most of the systems, it's only turning the fader down. It doesn't do any turning faders up.
Right.
If you're below it, it leaves it.
Right.
And if you're above it, it'll turn it down to meet it.
Right.
So I think there's one setting in Spotify. If you run Spotify at loud setting, then it will add extra limiting if it needs to get it up to the volume.
Right.
I would tell anybody to don't use that setting, because the
Right.
Spotify limiter is horrible. But other than that, it's only going to turn it down. So it should literally just be a volume change.
Right. Okay.
And a lot of that about the number of LUFS, because what they look at is integrated loudness. So the loudness of the whole track. It takes the whole track and it gives it a score of how loud it is, and then adjusts it up and down. A lot of it's to do with arrangement and stuff as well. So if you've got a track that starts loud, is loud all the way through and stops, then the overall integrated loudness of that track's going to be high.
Right.
Whereas if you've got a section in the middle that's really quiet, then the overall, then that's your loudness score is going to
It'll be a bit lower.
reduced
Yeah,
a bit. So it's going to get turned down a bit less. So then your louder bits will be a little bit louder. So it's not all about the master. A lot of it's in the arrangement and the mix and stuff as well.
Well, when it comes to bouncing down, we've got two potential ways of doing this. We can either print a mix within Pro Tools that generates a WAV file, and then I can literally go into the folder, extract that WAV file, and send you that as
Yeah.
and in my case, it will be 44.1 at 24-bit, because that's what
Perfect.
we've recorded at.
Yeah.
Or we can bounce to a WAV file at 24-bit in order to send to you. In your experience, are you aware of any quality difference between a printed version and a bounce version?
Yes. I think, I would always do the printing version.
Right.
Bounce bounce disc is pretty good, but I don't think it's perfect. Particularly, what I would say is the only one of the few firm rules: I would never ever use the offline bounce function,
No.
because that does thin data and it will
Yeah.
change things.
Yeah.
And I've had stuff when I've done stuff in like surround sound and stuff in the past. I've noticed big differences where I've bounced and it just sounds different.
Right.
Whereas I think if you print it back in, you can listen to your audio file as it's recording down. You know exactly what you've got,
Yeah.
and then you can export it.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I'd always print it. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when it comes to metadata, the world of metadata, so our plan is we want to release what you've just listened to, Hard Times, as
Yeah.
our single. So once everything's mastered, we will take that single track
Yeah.
and we will upload that onto the
Yeah,
digital
aggregator or whatever,
platforms.
Yeah.
We're probably going to, well, I will ask you for your recommendation, but at the moment I'm looking at CD Baby for various reasons, to use those as the distributor. And then maybe a month later we're going to release the EP,
Yeah.
which also contains the single Hard
Yeah.
Times. What happens on these streaming platforms when they've already received a single, then they get uploaded an EP that's got a track that's the same?
Yeah.
How does that work?
One thing you do need for a track to be on the streaming platforms is an IRSC code.
Yeah, we've got that.
Which is International Repertoire
Yeah,
something code.
you're right.
You've already got those.
Yes.
Anyway, once you have
whatever
that
it is.
number, that's a unique identifier for that
Yeah.
track. So I'd imagine that once you incorporate that IRSC code into another release, they'll.
Right.
But I do know a lot of people do this now, because it's quite a standard way is release a few teasers from the album and then bring the album out.
Yeah.
So I think through whoever uses
but the streaming platform kind of merges the data to
I'd
get
imagine all the digital.
So if you've got
digital distributor,
if you've had 20,000 streams of the single and then the album comes up, those 20,000 kind of
I think because it have the same IRSC code, IRSC it is.
Yeah.
It'll have the same code. It'll always resolve the plays will resolve to that code. I think, as far as I'm aware.
So what other metadata do you need? Do you have like a crib sheet of this is what I want you to send me?
I actually don't. It's something I've been meaning to make. But generally the basics is the track names as you want them to appear.
Yeah.
The artist, there's the album artist. So whatever the name of the band is, and then there's the track artist. So that's useful if you've got a compilation album or if you've got a feature, you know, Jay-Z featuring Beyonce. The album artist might be Jay-Z and the track artist might be Jay-Z and Beyonce.
So with our EP, so in this single, because we've used a professional singer, it's going to be Hard Times by Maybe Never featuring Vernon Lewis.
Yeah.
Do you then use your, is it the DDP software to embed all this stuff in that, or is it something separate and you only use the DDP for EPs and albums?
Well, so DDP is for CD duplication, really.
Right.
It's to make a disk image instead of CD duplication. So I'll only do DDP if it's
going to a CD
physical manufacturer. Yeah. But I use Wavelab and I've got it set up so any DDP metadata gets transferred across to WAV files and everything as well. So I'll just create WAV files for stuff that's going to be uploaded.
Right.
But it'll have metadata within the WAVs.
So the individual, when we come to upload the EP, then we just upload them as a group of WAV files together.
Yeah. And it might, depending on how you upload them, again, I very rarely get involved in the actual upload because they got somebody else to do that.
Right.
But depending on which uploader you use, it might automatically rip the metadata. When you choose the file, it should rip some of the metadata off that file straight away and populate some of the upload information.
So with the tracks then, we would send you a spreadsheet in essence with the information that we've just talked about, and then you would embed that into the files accordingly. And for the EP, we will be looking at getting a CD produced.
Yeah. So then you get a DDP. I'd send you a DDP image. Yeah. Which is designed to be inaccessible to you, if you know what I mean. Right. So it can't be messed around with. But I'd also send you a DDP player, which is an accessible version of that image, which you can then use to approve and check it. You can burn a test CD from it,
right?
All that kind of thing. So that'd be for your CD manufacturer. Then I'd send you some WAV files, which would be for upload to digital distribution. Yeah. What I normally do is, because I've got the Apple Digital Masters certification for my studio, I normally do all my WAVs for upload to meet the Apple Digital requirements. Right. The requirements aren't particularly stringent. It's mainly just about the peak levels and stuff.
Sam, thanks ever so much for your advice, for coming.
Pleasure.
It's been a bit of a nerve-wracking experience from my point of view, but I have to say I'm kind of pleased with what you've reported back on. Not too many issues. So I guess the next step is we'll get these files flown over to your neck of the woods, and hopefully the next episode we watch will be us at your little studio.
Yeah, great.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Cheers.